Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to Where the Road Rises, Law, Lessons, Legacy, with me, your host, Eileen Curlin-Walsh. I am delighted to be back in the studio with you for the first time now in almost a year. Our show took extra COVID precaution by Zooming with our guests rather than in-person interviews since Thanksgiving of last year. And for our first studio interview this year, we thought, who better to chat with than our own executive producer, Ron Jankowski. Let's find out how Channel 4 has been doing this last year and how our plans look for the future. I also want to turn the tables on Ron, find out a little bit more about the man behind the producer, the journey that led him to Channel 4, and his reflections as he looks back on that life well lived and his vision for the future. So, welcome viewers and welcome Ron.
Thank you for having me on your first show.
Isn't it wonderful?
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I am just delighted to be back, Ron.
I miss being with remember we had a show back, how many years ago?
Yes.
Will's Trust and More?
2011. We did Will's Trust and More. We did that for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. We had a lot of interest with the viewers. I just want to mention that right up front.
And thank you, Ron. We made a reel. We made a reel for Curlin-Walsh Law of frequently asked questions that used little extracts from that show. It is still on my website, and
Good.
People call with questions about it to this day. So none of it went unheard. So Ron, let's start with Channel 4. So how did Channel 4 handle the unusual circumstances of 2021, and how are we doing right now, and what are we thinking about for the future?
Well, I'm going to start back to 2020 when the COVID was really rampant and we were protecting ourselves the best we could. We still did 165 shows that year. And it was unbelievable because I was on the phone calling a lot of people in for interviews and different programs that we've had, very reluctant to come in. So we had to try to figure out what's the alternative, which you already went to, and that was a new platform going to Zoom.
Absolutely.
And Zoom platform is still being used today, but we overcame that. We sanitized our desks and the studio and the carpet, and we kept people 6 feet away. We wore masks coming into the studio, took them off to do the interview, so we got through that process. But I was really surprised that we were still able to achieve 165 shows.
And keep everybody safe. That really was amazing. Yeah. How are we looking now for the rest of 2021? Are you thinking about some new shows? One of the really wonderful things about Channel 4 is that we do keep adding new shows. We keep refreshing the shows we already have. I'm so proud of Channel 4, can't you tell?
You are, and thank you for that. Yes, I spend most of my time in trying to develop interest. I try to make the transparency as much as I can of our local government. I try to bring in as much awareness programs as I can. And that awareness programs is a spread of non-for-profit and lots of local things that are going on here that people really need help with publicity, and so I give it to them. And so I'm constantly working on that. We're almost, I would say we're coming up with like 3 or 4 brand new shows this year. One of them is on sports, and we have a producer that interviews the school, interviews teachers. We've even had 2 producers. Actually, my wife Sue was being part of that, interviewing teachers, interviewing sports programs such as we had coaches in here, and it's tough to get coaches in here because they're working all the time. So we found time to squeeze them in. So that is brand new. And we're constantly working on trying to bring in what is going on with the schools and how are they dealing with the COVID. How are the teachers dealing with it? So that's all important stuff. And of course, the administration has a nightmare dealing with the unions and everything else. So we like to get what are they thinking and what are they trying to do so that the public is aware of that.
And Ron, you do so much for the senior community. They love Channel 4. They're our greatest viewership. And I think it's terrific that you have been able to bring in so many healthcare providers, insurance providers, Medicare specialists to help the seniors navigate those more difficult decades. So great job.
Well, we are also, if I can cut you just a little, cut into your, what we are doing also is we are putting every show on YouTube. So if somebody wants to view a particular show and view it as many times as they want, on demand, forward, backward, repeat, they can do that on YouTube. But we probably have over 1,000 shows on YouTube now, and we just keep adding and adding. And I talked to Carl Gurman, who's our engineer, and we have to. He's looking at how many shows we have, and we have to keep taking shows off. And we go back maybe 3 years or 4 years and cut those shows off from YouTube so that we have a capacity to add on new shows. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Right. So the ability to keep creating new shows as well as a facility to watch the old ones, to find something from 3 years ago, from something that you watched but you really wanted to kind of do a deeper dive into it, to be able to find it on YouTube. That's terrific. How very modern are we here at Channel 4? No, I think that's terrific, as well as moving to the Zoom platform, being able to keep going during the pandemic. You know, it's another measure of how Channel 4 has reacted to exactly what the viewership, what the community has wanted.
Well, we have plans to go even above and beyond that.
Yeah.
And I can share that with you now.
Yes.
One thing, we've already done a live show. We actually had live cameras out in front of City Hall. The mayor had, I think it was a Veterans Day. We did a fantastic show, I thought, being live, and we were only doing like 2 or 3 a year, but we're trying to introduce ourselves into the live broadcast, and that takes a lot of people and a lot of talent to know what to do. So we're working in that, and then also we're talking about expanding our studio where we're at right now. If I do get the space that I've been promised, which is adjacent to this studio, it will increase our capacity by 100%. And so I'm excited about that. I'm already in the process of buying new lighting and cameras and a whole lot of stuff for that to happen, which I hope will happen sometime next year.
Maybe we'll even have a live audience. Who knows?
You never know. Yes.
You never know.
No,
you
that was a
never
good
know.
point. You know, honestly,
Nothing
never
is too
thought
ambitious,
of that.
right?
Yeah, I never thought of that. I'm going to keep that in mind. There is a possibility we could pull that off.
Lovely. Well, Ron, you have been the face, the voice of Channel 4 since its inception now, from the year 2000.
From the year 2000. I took this over as a volunteer. I turned my TV on one day and I looked at Channel 4. It was Channel 6 at the time on Comcast. And I saw a camera on in the console room, and it wasn't being manned. It was just a wide view. So I talked to my wife, and excuse me for a second, I have to take a little sip. I talked to my wife, and she said, you know, they're running some kind of a plate after this show, and the plate says they're looking for volunteers. There's somebody that understands the video and production and so on. So I was very reluctant to call. She called for me and made an appointment for me to come here. So I came to a meeting, and I could tell walking in the meeting that they really were struggling. They really didn't know what to do. So what I'm getting at is we had one Radio Shack camera. It was a VHS. No one running it. Sometimes they would run it. And we went from that to 2 cameras in the console room, manned cameras, to 3 cameras. And we opened up this studio to record shows. And it just blossomed out to now we have 3 cameras in here. We have all kinds of equipment that we could teleprompter and feed our hosts and our guests with information, and it's just, I don't know. I guess I have to say, if it weren't for our Mayor Strauss and the consul, his consul, being very supportive, this would not have happened. That's really where it came from.
Yes. A lot of dedication and building, and then being able to build on what you already had because you had some proven success to have the studio you have today. And viewers, sometime we must take you around the studio because the editing room, I think, looks like Oprah's studio with all the screens and the wall with the different shows, the different times. It is really professional.
Thank you. Thank you.
But this was not your first rodeo, Ron. You had worked in TV before.
I worked in TV. I actually ended up running Channel 5, NBC television. But I started out just prior to that. I started out in the Apollo space program. I was involved with that. And that is another venture that I got involved in. So I understood electronics. So when I applied with NBC, they said, well, you understand electronics. We're looking for somebody who is a buyer. I said, well, I was a buyer in purchasing. So I got the job, and things were really ragtag. I professionalized it and got it fully operational to a professional operation. Then they offered me another step up and another step up. And within, I think it was like 12 years before I retired, I was actually running everything that you can imagine, with the exception of the news anchors. I had nothing to do with their contracts. That's a separate thing. But I was part of the General Electric corporate, and General Electric owned NBC television. So I was intermediate for them to develop and expand Channel 5, and that's where the NBC building came about. That project was mine in Chicago. So I lived with every floor that it had to be built and all the electronics going in. Of course, I had engineers and stuff like that working with me. But we developed that thing where we were able to move from the merchandise mart where they were for, I don't know how many years, many, many years when television first started out, to a point of moving from a Friday 10 o'clock newscast to Sunday 10 o'clock newscast. That weekend, we moved the total operation. Right. Electronics, desks, offices was all accomplished then. That was quite a challenge for my life to go through that, but it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. The end result was I learned a lot about broadcasts. I learned about people. I learned about unions. And I appreciate the people that were standing behind the equipment and making it work to make the image look good, it be a show or whatever. Absolutely. So I learned a lot in that through that process. But yes, and then I retired, and I went on to just sitting back for a year, not doing anything. And my son was a police officer at Orland Park, and he said, Ned, they're looking for someone to maybe create an evidence room because things are not in good shape there. So I went there for an interview with the Chief McCarthy at that time. He's a well-known person.
Reagan.
He took the bullet for Reagan.
That's it.
And Chief McCarthy's still doing very, very well. I think now he took the job in maybe Mokina or somewhere, a southern suburb. He's temporary chief there till they hire someone, I guess. But anyway, he hired me, and I had some experience with Cook County Police. I was working for them as a I guess like a senior community service person, and that was in Lamont. So I was there for a while. So he knew that I had experience with the police. He says, well, can you do this evidence? And I says, yeah, that's not a problem. It's a matter of managing the thing. So I created a manual system, put it on the computer, and blah, blah, blah. So they are up and running. Then I retired from that. And that's where it started with Channel 4. So I'm going backwards a little bit, but then Channel 4 had the opportunity for me to be a volunteer, and I volunteered for a couple of years to see what I could do with this thing. And I remember the day they said, Is there about it? I was working here as a volunteer for about maybe 4 months or so, and they said, "Is there anything you could do with this?" And I said, "Well, I have to have a vision. How can I make this worthy of all the time and money that has to go into this?" And I created that vision, and that vision was to make our community aware of what's going on, both business-wise and with legislation of our local government and the problems that are going on. Make them aware of these things. Make them aware of the businesses coming into town and giving them the exposure that they need. Promoting those businesses and then helping the non-for-profit and onward.
Yeah.
With the awareness program and everything else I did that on Saturday afternoons and Sunday afternoons for, I don't even remember, it was weeks and weeks and weeks, till I convinced them to spend some money for equipment, and then I just exploded because I showed them what I could do, all the things that I just shared with you.
And that vision has led to us being here, and it's still expanding, as
Yes.
you were saying before. How we will do some live shows, expand the studio. It's absolutely amazing, and congratulations.
Thank you.
On that, Ron. Now I'm going to unpack a little of what you said, because some of the experiences you've had are things that fascinate most people. You've worked with celebrities, you've worked in TV, you've worked in evidence rooms, setting up an evidence team, an evidence tech. So what has that taught you about humanity? First, is it as glamorous as it sounds to work in a TV studio? What is it like working with the talent versus the people behind the cameras? You work in evidence and you're seeing a whole other side of human nature. So what is it really like, and how are we doing as humans? Are we doing okay?
I'm going to start with the police. That really opened up my eyes with the police department, in that so many people have problems in this world. They have family problems and neighbor problems and people that just have hatred. And I learned how to deal with that. I learned to talk to people, and they come in and they would share, well, I was arrested for retail theft, and they took everything away from me and my personal stuff. You have it. So I would hear that story, and I'd have to sort out what was taken illegally and what was really theirs and give that back. So I heard all these, I guess you could say, horror stories of their personal life, and that really opened up my eyes. So I had more feeling for people. I learned to listen. I learned to digest and hear and have empathy for what they're telling you. So that's where I learned about human nature, is at the police department. But learning about being with the glamorous and celebrities and the glamour that goes with that, they put their pants on like I do. And they're not anything different. They are people, and they have a following. That's a little different than the person that's behind the camera. That person is in front of the camera, and they have a following. Those people have a look and a perspective of things that people like, and so they carry an asset within themselves wherever they go. And what I mean by that is, you're a hot property. Let's say you're a news anchor. You're a hot property, and people like you, and they watch you, and they view your shows, and they buy the products that are sponsors. But then, for some reason, the contract expires, and their agent moves them to another network. Well, that following goes with that person sometimes. It doesn't stay with that station. And so it's amazing how people follow things that they like. And when they see it on TV, they look at that person and they say, I really trust that person, what they're telling me. And when that person's not there anymore, it's a void in their life. And so if they pop up on another network, they're there with them. So I've learned that. And that is really interesting to see. When someone is a property, they make their money because of that, but they also have a tremendous following, and that brings the ratings with that.
Yeah. And did you find that the talent, the front of the camera people appreciated those behind the camera who made them look good, who had the skills?
Most
did.
I wouldn't say all.
Yeah.
Most of them do appreciate that because the camera person can make you look bad or look good depending on your image. What you say is one thing, but your image is something else. And we have a great engineer here that makes us look good right now. He's got all these cameras rolling. In fact, he's one man and he's got 3 cameras going here. That's fantastic. If Carl weren't here, we would have 3 people running 3 cameras. I mean, that's how it goes. So, yes, I would say most of the celebrities do appreciate the crew that makes them look good.
Yeah, especially if they've had lots of years in the industry. I read the memoir of Michael Parkinson once. He would be the Johnny Carson of the UK show for 40, 50 years. And he said that was one of his first bitter lessons, was not to appreciate who was supporting him on that stage and the difference in how that could make him look. And he learned very early how valuable it was to foster those relationships and treat everyone who was in the room, both behind the camera and in front of it, as an equal part of the team. Ron, what about your childhood? So I love that you learned the empathy through hearing the stories of people who'd been through such difficult things. Did you have a happy childhood? Were your parents empathetic? Were they your role models? How did you start out in the world? What was the beginning of your story?
Well, the beginning of me is I was Polish Catholic, very strict. You went to church every Sunday. You dressed up for church every Sunday. You learned, and I'm going to give you an example of what I learned. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I tell this to my wife often about our grandkids. A storm door has glass on it, usually. And I remember opening up the storm door and pushing on the glass to open up the door. And my mother called me over, and she says, "You see what you just did?" Yeah, I opened up the door. No. You put your handprints all over the glass. You know what I have to do now? I have to go and wash that. I never forgot that. From that point on, for some reason, I learned that the doorknob is for a doorknob, and don't push the glass. And so that's how I was brought up. I was brought up, if you dropped something at the table onto the floor, you bent over and you picked it up, even though I was a young kid. So that was how I was brought up. Strict, yes, but I also didn't abuse things. And so as I grew up, and I have an older brother. He's 10 years older than I am. Very healthy. He's 93. And he's really doing great. I kind of modeled after him. He was like my father because he would take me places. My father came from Poland, and his first job was the steel mills. And most everybody in the southeast side of Chicago is where I grew up, was some ethnic group, and that neighborhood, for the most part, worked at the steel mills. I don't want to say everybody, but I would say for the most part. And they were all good people to each other, good neighbors. You'd walk down the street, and they would be sitting on their front porch in the afternoon, in the evening. They'd say, "Come on over, here's a glass of pop, here's a glass of water. You guys are walking, it's hot out." That's how I grew up. That's how I began to appreciate neighbors and people. And I just brought that up through my life from that point.
And even still today with our Pales Heights community, with our viewership. So what about challenges, Ron? I'm sure it wasn't a rose-strewn pathway. What has the greatest challenge been that you've faced in your life to date, and how did you conquer it? What did you learn from it?
You know, I don't want to say I had challenges all through my life. I want to focus on probably the scariest challenge I had in my life, and that is when I was in a doctor's office after many tests, and my wife was with me, and he says, "You have cancer." That was very emotional. I'm a little bit there now.
It's a frightening
word. It set me back. But he said, "Ron, you're in the middle of the street and there's a bus coming down the street. And you can either walk towards the bus and the bus is going to hit you because you're dumb enough to do that, or I'm smart enough to pull you off that street to let the bus go by and you not be hurt, and that's what I'm going to do for you. You will get over this. And that was 2016. And I apply that to myself during the process of tests, further tests, and then going through radiation. Every morning, every day, I think it was like, for, I don't know how many weeks, 14 weeks or whatever it was. I did what I had to. I had to drink like 20 ounces of water or whatever, and I went and had my radiation at 7:30 in the morning, and at 8:15 I was here. And I did that, and I forced myself to be here, to work at Channel 4, to continue with my job and concentrate on that, and not me. And that's how I got through it. That was really a challenge for me.
That is so inspiring. And you gave me goosebumps with the doctor and the bus. That is such a powerful image. As well as the hope after the devastation, that someone can tell you, I can take you out in front of that bus. You do not have to get hit by that bus. You must have had some amazing physicians, some terrific
I did.
help.
I was very, very lucky. And you know, 1 year later, he says you no longer have cancer.
Another emotional moment.
Yeah.
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 Ron, what would you say to our viewers facing their health challenges and navigating the healthcare providers? What would the greatest piece of advice from you having gone through that fire
It's not
to
the end.
our viewers?
I can
It's
only
not
say
the
it
end.
is not the end. There's medication, there are doctors, there are providers, hospitals that now have treatment, and all I can say is you have to stay positive to get through it properly, and to make your life worthy of wanting to live during that process. It's not easy.
It's not easy, and I'm sure that you want to just stay in bed and feel sorry for yourself rather than get in and get
quickly.
the work done.
That'll take you down real quick.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Absolutely love that, Ron. There's more to live for yet. It's not over. No matter what age or stage you are in your life, you've got to find a reason to keep going on, and that'll help you through,
Perfectly
through
said.
the thorns.
Perfect.
Oh. So what is your proudest achievement now as you look back in your life? Your greatest happiness?
Well, I have to go back a little bit. I have to say that I had a very happy marriage with 3 children, and unfortunately, unexpectedly, my wife passed away, and we were married 39 and a half years. That first year was, I had trouble getting my head together. I went through a grievance program with the pastor and all, and the second year, I started to get involved with church again, and I was an usher to keep myself going again to try to overcome this. Yeah. And I had a parent come up to me and said, "Ron, we would like for you to meet our daughter." And I looked at him and I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is." I don't believe this is happening to me.
Yes,
I don't believe this is happening, but I tried to keep straight, and because I didn't want to embarrass the gentleman. So okay, and I'm taking care of people, passing on him books and stuff, and I said, yeah, okay. So I just kind of let that lie, and he came up to me after church, and he says, she's going to be here next week. We would like to introduce you to her. Okay, so I did meet her, and that's Sue Jankowski. We met in church, we dated for a while, and we got engaged in church, and we got married in the same church, and we've had a wonderful life, and that is how I overcame that. And that is probably the biggest and best blessing I ever had. She's very supportive, was totally supportive through the process of cancer, needless to say, in my family, I mean the rest of the family. So that really was that support in there, always there to help me, make me feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for all the challenges you've had, you have come out the other side with a positive lesson learned.
I have.
Oh, I love that, Ron. So does everything make sense now? Have you figured it all out, do you think? Or are there still some mysteries to life?
There's no mystery, not to me. I have a plan. I've already shared part of it with you that I want to take Channel 4 to the next level. One, the live broadcast, and the other is expanding the studio. I have already talked to Comcast, and I have already told them that if I can achieve that, we will probably be the largest cable access station that is in the south part of the Chicagoland area, and probably the most active. Yes, I don't think anyone is even close to us other than you want to consider the northern part of town like Naperville.
Yes.
We can't compare to that. They have 150,000 people in their population, and we're like 12,500. With that exception, we will be the largest and we will be the most active. And I hope now that I am working very closely with Palos Hills, with the city of Palos Hills, with programs for them to help develop their city as well through Channel 4 and Palos Heights. I can do that for other communities and maybe expand from there. So my question to Comcast is, are we going to still be on TV? Or is this going to go to the internet? And they said they're making no changes. So with that, I'm going to keep focusing on Channel 4 television to keep expanding on that. And as you know, with YouTube, we're on the internet with that. So we're going to do both. And I hope that we can accomplish something that no one else has ever done by when we expand the studio.
Yeah. So what theme I hear running through all the stories you've told is the vision. You've always had a vision, you continue to have a vision. So perhaps that's another secret to happiness, secret to longevity, secret to health, is always have a vision, always have a goal you're working towards.
I always have a goal. There is no mystery. There is no void. I know where I want to go. And in part of my workings with Channel 4 in Palos Heights is constantly looking next month and the month after next year and looking at what we can do and what kind of shows we can bring in and how we can improve the communication with the community. Yeah. That's my goal.
That's excellent. So we are going forward, viewers. Come along with us for the ride. So how about if we wrap up with a favorite quote or poem? Is there a book, a Bible verse? Is there something that has been meaningful for you, Ron, that you would share with our viewers?
It would be a prayer. The Our Father. That's it. Yeah. I believe in that.
Yeah, and that has sustained you.
Yes.
Yes. I would say the Hail Mary for me would be a very similar, just solid rock, a foundation that you go to those words so familiar flowing through your head. It's a meditation. Yeah. It's a meditation and an absolute rock, a foundation. I love that, Ron. Well, that is everything we're going to talk about today, although we never did get to Apollo. So maybe we'll do another interview because I want to know more about that. You, Ron, working on the Apollo. So thanks for sharing your stories. Thank you, viewers, for watching. I'm going to leave you with the words of Abraham Lincoln, which is very relevant to the stories that Ron has told. It's not the years in your life that matters, but the life in your years. So thanks again, Ron. Thank you again for your company, and I will see you next time on Where the Road Rises. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.